Is it possible to remember the details, names, and dates of your past life? Or to return to Earth in the body of another person to find his killer and give him what he deserves? Or maybe in order to see his loved ones again? Scientific data and facts prove that this is possible. Here are 10 outstanding stories that actually happened, where there are memories of a past life. Story number 1. A 3-year-old boy remembered his past life, found his killer, as well as a hidden body. The late Dr. Eli Lash, best known for his scientific work in Gaza as part of Israeli operations, studied the case of a 3-year-old boy who lived near the border with Syria and Israel. The boy said he remembers being hacked to death with an axe in a previous life. He told the details of his murder and even showed the elders of the village where his body was buried. The body with a wound on the head was indeed found in the specified place. In addition, he made public the place where the murder weapon itself was hidden. After presenting the evidence, he also identified his killer, confidently pointing to one of his neighbors. The evidence supporting his guilt was so irrefutable that the man confessed to the crime. History number 2. The boy remembered his wife and the murderer from his past life and found them again. Semih Tutuzmus was born in the village of Sarkanak, Turkey. As soon as the boy learned to speak, he told his family that his real name was Selim Fesli. But another thing is also strange. When the boy's mother was pregnant with him, she had a dream in which a man with a bloody face, communicating with her, told some details of his life. He claimed that his name was Selim Fesli. It turned out that a man with that name really lived in a nearby village and died in 1958. He was wounded in the face and right ear. Tutu was born with a deformed right ear. When he was 4 years old, the boy went to Fesli's house and told his widow, "I am Selim, and you are my wife, Kataib." He recalled some details of their life together, and also called the names of their children. No one could have known these details except the deceased himself. Then he shocked everyone by identifying the person who shot him. This case was studied by the late Dr. Ian Stevenson of the University of Virginia. Story number 3. The firefighter was a general during the Civil War. Retired firefighter Jeffrey Keane felt an inexplicable desire to visit the field where the famous Battle of Antietam took place during the Civil War between North and South. Jeffrey went there as a tourist, but strange, almost suffering emotions did not leave him for a long time. Experiencing almost physical pain, he could hardly describe in words everything he felt. Discussing these feelings later with specialists, the phrase "not now" was constantly spinning in Jeffrey's head. He became interested in the topic of the Civil War and began to look through literature in local libraries and archives. In one of the sources he found an article about John Brown Gordon, John B. Gordon, a general who took part in the Civil War. It turned out that the famous war hero persistently repeated the phrase "not now," holding his troops in the Battle of Antietam. The physical resemblance between him and Gordon was also striking. In addition, many of the firefighters from his brigade were surprisingly similar to the people who took part in the battle. Keane found other similarities between the general's appearance and his own. For example, in the place where Gordon was wounded, Keane had birthmarks. This case was studied by Dr. Walter Semkiv, a psychiatrist who works as an expert on reincarnation at the Institute for the Integration of Science, Intuition and Spirit (ISIS). Story number 4. The boy recalls his past life as a pilot who participated in World War II. Dr. Jim Tucker from the University of Virginia studied the case of James Leininger from Louisiana. When the boy turned 2 years old, he began to have nightmares related to the plane crash. After terrible visions, Jim claimed that he was shot down by the Japanese, that his plane took off from the American aircraft carrier Natoma Bay, and that he had a friend named Jack Larson. He also assumed that in a previous life his name was James. As it turned out, there really was a pilot named James Houston Jr. during World War II. The life and death of this guy, surprisingly, coincided with all the details told by the boy. With the help of the photo, Leininger was also able to determine the place where Houston's plane crashed. Story number 5. Burned to the ground in Chicago. 2-year-old Luke from Cincinnati, Ohio, was 2 years old when he began having strange visions. The boy told his parents about his past life. He was a black-haired woman named Pam, who died in a building fire in Chicago, trying to jump out of a window. As it turned out, a terrible tragedy really happened in 1993. A fire broke out at the Paxton Hotel, as a result of which an African-American Pamela Robinson died. She jumped out of the window in an attempt to escape from the fire. When Luke's parents asked the boy to describe Pam's appearance, he described her as she really was. To make sure that her son's stories were true, the mother printed out several photos of African-American women, including a photo of Pam, and asked Luke to point to the one he was talking about. The boy pointed to Robinson's picture without hesitation and said, "This is Pam." Luke's story formed the basis of the documentary The Ghost Inside My Child. Story number 6. A 4-year-old boy recalls his past life in Hollywood. Ryan was 4 years old when he began to remember his past life, which he spent in Hollywood and which tragically ended after he had a heart attack. The book about Hollywood provoked a wave of further memories. And after the boy watched the movie Night After Night, a 1932 picture, he said that he was friends with a man who played the role of a cowboy in the film, and was also an actor from a cigarette commercial. This film starred actor Gordon Nance. He starred in a number of films, playing cowboys, and also, indeed, was the face of cigarette advertising. Ryan presented a picture of his past life, told about a man named Marty Martin. Ryan correctly reproduced the scenes in which Martin participated, and even described his life in great detail. He spoke in detail about the actor's life, for example, about dancing on Broadway, about his 3 younger sisters, and also correctly named the color of his car. This unusual case was handled by Dr. Tucker, who confirmed Ryan's memories by comparing the data received from the boy with members of Marty Martin's family. Story number 7. The boy recalls his past life as a monk in Sri Lanka. Daminda Bandara Ratnayak, a 3-year-old boy from Tundenia, Sri Lanka, suddenly began to talk about the fact that in his previous life he was a monk. He insisted on observing all the rituals and restrictions characteristic of the life of monks. The boy confidently stated that he was the oldest monk in the temple of Asturia, and that he died of chest pains. He also said he had a red car and a radio. He described the elephant with special love. The Venerable Mahanayaka Ganapana, the late monk from the temple of Asturia, really lived a few years ago. The details of his life and death corresponded to everything the boy told. There were only minor discrepancies in the whole description. For example, he had a gramophone instead of a radio, but the boy probably did not know how to describe a gramophone, so he could not pinpoint this subject. This case was carefully studied by Dr. Elender Haraldsson, Professor Emeritus at the University of Iceland in Reykjavik. Story number 8. A Lebanese boy remembers his past life. Dr. Haraldsson traveled to Lebanon to learn more about another strange case involving a boy named Nazi Aldanif. Aldanif began telling his parents about his past life immediately after he learned to speak. He was proud to talk about his weapons, which he allegedly owned. At the same time, the boy used terms that you obviously don't expect to hear from a young child. His parents were also surprised that at this age their son showed an increased interest in cigarettes and whiskey. He also told about a mute girl who had only one arm, said that he had a red car, and that he was shot by some people who came to his house. Aldanif went to the house where he lived in a previous life. This small town of Kavershaman is located just 20 kilometers from his current home. There really once lived a man named Fuad Asad Hadij, and the details of his life fully corresponded to what the boy told. Hadij's widow asked the boy a few questions to check on him. The questions were of the following kind: who laid the foundation of this gate at the entrance to the house? Who painted the walls? Nazi answered all the questions correctly. It convinced his family and friends that the boy was telling the truth, and that he really remembers his past life. Story number 9. A person remembers the lessons of his past life. Ruprecht Schultz's business flourished in the pre-war years in Berlin. He owned a chain of laundries throughout the city. Unfortunately, this man lost consciousness as soon as the Second World War began. And suddenly the man remembered his past life, in which he too seems to have suffered a similar failure. He remembered that his business in a previous life had to do with timber or shipping, and that he committed suicide by shooting himself on the day of a festival celebration after serious financial losses. He was drawn to Wilhelmshaven, a port city in northern Germany. According to his feelings, he was associated with this place in the 1880s. Records were found of a man named Helmut Kohler who, indeed, committed suicide in 1887 in Wilhelmshaven during the celebration of the Day of Repentance and Prayer Festival. Kohler went bankrupt after making a fatal mistake in running a shipping business. The man decided to import too much wood, based on unreliable forecasts of an increase in taxes on the goods. As a result, the business failed, and the merchant himself faced serious problems. The only way out he saw then was a gun and a bullet fired into his temple. As it turned out, Kohler's business was not going as badly as he thought when he shot himself. It was a good lesson for Schultz, who faced similar difficulties and heavy losses. The man began to hope for a better future without negative thoughts about suicide. Story number 10. The screenwriter of the film Gone with the Wind was born in the body of another person. A little boy named Lee insisted that his middle name was Ko, and his birthday was June 26, although this was not the case. He also stated that he lived in Hollywood and that he had a daughter named Jennifer. According to the boy, he wrote scripts for films. When his sister asked him how old he was, he replied that when he died, he was 48 years old. His family members listed the films, asking him if he had written a script for one of them. He shook his head negatively. And only when the painting Gone with the Wind was named, he reacted in the affirmative. It is known that the script for the film was written by Sidney Coe Howard. Howard, indeed, had a daughter named Jennifer, and he died at the age of 48. Dr. Tucker undertook to investigate such an unusual case.